All right, today we're diving into one of the most famous documents in the entire world, the Declaration of Independence. But here's the twist. We're not just looking at the words that made the cut. We are going hunting for a ghost, a deleted passage that secretly shaped the United States for centuries. You know these words. They're practically the soul of the American promise, right? I mean, what a radical, universal claim about human dignity and liberty. It's an idea that has been a beacon for people literally all over the globe. But, and this is a huge but, in 1776, this number, around 500,000, was the number of people held in chattel slavery in the 13 colonies. And we're not just talking about a lack of freedom. This was its complete and total opposite, a system where human beings were legally property, to be bought, sold, and inherited like furniture. So how do you even begin to square that circle? How does a document all about liberty get written in a land filled with slavery? Well, this staggering contradiction wasn't some historical accident or a blind spot. The founders knew. Oh, they were fully aware of it. And the key to understanding how they dealt with it isn't in the words they kept, but in an absolutely explosive 168-word passage that they chose to erase. This deleted clause, this ghost in the text, it reveals the first great, and you could argue the most tragic, compromise in all of American history. And get this, the person who wrote this fiery condemnation of the slave trade was none other than Thomas Jefferson, who himself enslaved people his entire life. So its removal by the Continental Congress wasn't just some minor edit. No way. It was a foundational, dark bargain that was struck for one reason, to hold a fragile new nation together. So what did this lost clause actually say? And to really understand why it was so explosive, we have to dissect Jefferson's argument and the brilliant but ultimately fatal flaws inside of it. Okay, so Jefferson basically built his attack in three parts. First, he goes big, calling the slave trade a moral evil, a crime against humanity. Second, he points the finger, shifting 100% of the blame onto a single villain, King George. But it's that third step, that's where the whole argument just comes crashing down. And here's some of the actual text. Jefferson isn't just talking about a bad policy here, he's invoking natural law. He calls the slave trade piratical warfare, and you can almost feel the sarcasm dripping off the page when he pins it all on the Christian king, just to highlight the profound hypocrisy of it all. And this is the key that unlocks the whole contradiction. See, back in 1775, the British royal governor of Virginia, a guy named Lord Dunmore, he issued a proclamation that absolutely terrified the colonists. It offered freedom to any enslaved person who escaped and fought for the king. It was a strategic masterstroke, turning the institution of slavery into a weapon of war against the patriots. So here's the crucial problem. Jefferson's clause accuses the king of the crime of enslaving people who have a sacred right to liberty. But then, just a few lines later, he accuses the king of the crime of offering them that very liberty. The delegates in Congress couldn't have it both ways. It just didn't work. So, faced with this tangled mess of logic and a subject that could tear them apart, we have to ask, who forced the deletion? And what was the ultimate price of that unity? You see, this clause was pretty much doomed because slavery wasn't just a Southern institution. The whole colonial economy was tangled up in it. New England merchants ran the ships that made the slave trade possible. Northern farms grew the food to provision the brutal sugar plantations in the West Indies. Everything was connected. But the fiercest opposition, no surprise, came from the South. In places like South Carolina, the enslaved population was enormous, nearing or even exceeding the free population. For those delegates, Jefferson's clause wasn't just an insult. They saw it as a direct threat to their entire economic and social order. So it all came down to this. The delegates from South Carolina and Georgia drew a line in the sand. They issued an ultimatum. Either the clause goes or we go. And the northern delegates, well, their own economies were tied up in the slave trade, so they didn't really push back. In the end, the immediate need for a united front against Britain just trunked everything else. But here's the thing. That one act of silence in 1776 didn't solve the problem. It just kicked the can down the road. It postponed the reckoning. And by doing so, it cast a long, dark shadow over the next 87 years of American history. You can draw a direct, tragic line from this single decision. The Compromise in 76 set a pattern. You see it again in the Constitution, which protected slavery. You see it when Congress literally passed gag rules to avoid even debating the topic. This habit of avoiding the issue at all costs led directly to the catastrophe of the Civil War. And this is what's so incredible, the great, stunning paradox of this whole story. They edited the document to protect slavery. But the words they left in, all men are created equal, became the single most powerful weapon against slavery. So the compromise failed, but the ideal, that ideal, endured. And believe me, this hypocrisy was not lost on the rest of the world. British critics like Samuel Johnson jumped on it immediately, mocking the American revolutionaries for demanding freedom for themselves while denying it to others. But the most powerful critiques came from within. Abolitionists like the incredible Frederick Douglass took the founders' own words and hurled them right back out the nation. He wasn't rejecting the Declaration's ideals. He was demanding that America finally live up to them for all its people. And so, that's what we're left with. The Declaration of Independence is a document born of both a truly noble promise and a dark, difficult bargain. Its history reminds us that the struggle over what America really means began at the very moment of its creation, and that's a struggle that continues to this day. It really makes you wonder which legacy echoes loudest today, the compromise it made or the promise it kept.